So you're. Let's do this. I'll point back up.
Okay.
Yep. I'll point back up. I'll switch to TV in the back. Counselor Donovan or Counselor Fellows, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great. But no one will be able to see the slideshow.
That's right.
Okay. So what does this do?
I said this earlier, but participants, you got 31 participants.
I won't be able to see if anyone has their hands up. Karen, do you have your laptop? Okay, and then you can join. Okay, okay, great. Okay. All right, well. We can share. Okay, all right. We'll share the presentation after. So that was fun. Thanks for all. Thanks for that. So the first thing that I wanted to talk to you all about is the recap of the process that we've gone through. And all of this is online. If you go to our website, Town of Scarborough, and you just do the little magnifying glass short-term rentals, it takes you right there. There's a really good recap. You can watch old videos. But we started this July 13th, 2023. And the ordinance committee started it, and it really gained momentum because of LD 2003. There was a concern that we would be proliferated, there would be a proliferation of accessory dwelling units. And everybody would be building ADUs and short-term renting them. And that didn't really happen. We also already have protections in place preventing that from happening. But that's really where some of this gained some momentum. Later that summer in September, we had an ordinance committee review, and then in that November, we had a council corner live. And I think that many of you were at that meeting. We had Councilor Seither and Councilor McGee at the time. They held a meeting here in this room. It was well attended. We got some good input, but we continued on with the process. So the next summer in June 2024, we presented, we had a workshop with council, and I went over what a lot of other communities were doing and what it looks like in several, different options. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Then in September of that year, we presented it to ordinance committee. We were almost done. And then it was decided at ordinance committee, hey, we're gonna get 3 new counselors. That's a big change on the council body. Let's take a step back. Staff, look at this with people who are interested in it over the winter, and then we'll get back to it. To be perfectly honest, it didn't do a whole lot with it over the winter because we got 3 new counselors. And we had several other projects. You may all remember the wetland setbacks that was happening around the same time. So we had different focuses, but this did show up as a council goal this year. And so I picked it back up. I reached out to some people who had reached out to me over that time period. We had what I would call just a small group meeting. Some people, several people in this room were there. We looked at the draft that we had presented earlier in the fall, and then we tweaked it a bit. And that's where we are here. So we've tweaked the ordinance a bit. We have the draft. I think most of you got a copy. It's online as well. But that's what I really wanted to talk to you and spend time with you about where it's at. So the goals of this kind of ordinance, really it's multifaceted. It starts, you want to make sure that you're protecting the existing neighborhoods, but we also understand we're in a beach community, right? And so it's our thing. We have short-term rentals here. So we definitely didn't want to do anything to prohibit that. Accountability, some licensing requirements is when we were going through what other communities were doing, that came up that it would be nice if you were purchasing a home to be able to say, are my neighbors short-term renting? Or is that gonna be my future? Am I gonna have a new person in my backyard or next door? Or am I at the beach and everybody's doing it, so I can do it too? That kind of thing. Safety inspections. And again, having some sort of process for how we address it when we do have violations. So that was really the goal. We did go over some of our existing regulations. We have some things right now that address ADUs, accessory dwelling units. And I get a lot of calls about this, and it's a little bit confusing. But we allow accessory dwelling units basically right now, anywhere you can have a single family home, but you can't short-term rent it. And by short-term rental, I mean you can't rent it for less than 28 days. So that is a conversation that we have multiple times with multiple people. What we find is the first person who permits it, they have to sign an affidavit, they have to go through the process and they know, but then if that property gets sold or it changes hands, oftentimes those next owners don't know. So when they call, we try to always make sure that they understand. On the flip side of that, also, if you have an ADU, you can't short-term rental your main house. It's a weird thing. You have to be a primary resident in one of them for 183 days. And you can't short-term rental them for less than 28. So those are rules we have now. Just wanted to give those out to you guys. This does not apply to bed and breakfast, hotels, those sort of campgrounds, those sorts of things. So when we started this whole process, I looked at Bar Harbor, Cape Elizabeth, Falmouth, Freeport, Kennebunkport, Kittery, and Southport. Those all have short-term rental ordinances. They all vary in how they are set up. But what we ultimately came up with is that our definition would match how we treat ADUs. So we would go with the short-term rental would be less than 28 days. And that seems the simplest. It matched our existing ordinance. We also, some of these communities, they have several different variations. I mean, some of them get really confusing. Like if you're gonna rent it out for twice a weekend or 2 times a month for 3 days or more, we just ultimately decided that easy was the best. And we weren't going to worry about having any sort of time frames. It was just that 28 days keep it simple. So the next part that we talked about was regulation types. Some communities also limit the amounts that you can do. They have caps, and those are typically more of a license. So there might be a lottery system. We quickly decided, no, we weren't interested in doing that. This is really just about a registration process. We know where they are, and we'll have a list, but we weren't worried. I think that was an initial from that Council Corner Live. There was a lot of concern about, are you going to limit the number? And that was never part of the conversation. So the where and when, some communities, and this may be something that we can discuss as we go through this, some communities limit where you can do them. Some communities have exemption areas, like Goose Rocks Beach and Port. It doesn't apply to Goose Rocks. It's just been something that's been done so long, they don't even worry about it. But we ultimately, what's presented right now is there's no caps, and they would be allowed where all residential uses are allowed. And inspections required. Of the towns that we looked at, most had some sort of inspection. Some had just a self-inspection only, where you as the property owner or the owner's representative would sign an affidavit that you meet some criteria. And the inspections really have to do with those safety issues. You know, your carbon monoxide, your smoke alarms, do you have a fire extinguisher, those types of things. So the draft in its current form requires an initial inspection after registering for life and safety codes. So that is included in the current draft. And then what would happen, the property would be on a list for an ongoing inspection every 3 to 5 years, or when the property changes hands. Then fees. The fees from the communities that we looked at really ranged anywhere from $50 to, I think, $400. We have not landed on a fee, but it would be like $100, $150. And then administration was fairly simple. The way we are set up in the town, our town clerk would administer the process. And then the code enforcement officer and the fire department would administer the public safety component.
I just asked you.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So, because I don't want to forget it.
Sure.
The $100 or $150 fee is one time?
That would be an
year?
annual fee.
Annual.
Yes, that's how it's proposed right now. So, In summary, when we went through all of the other communities and we had the dialogue with the different groups, we came up, we were gonna keep it pretty simple, short terms under 28 days. The ADU law that we have right now would stay on the books. There would be an annual registration process with that initial inspections, and then the annual fee. So that was where we got to, okay, staff, go forth, create a draft, bring it back to us. So the draft that you all have is probably 6 iterations in with some tweaking along the way. But it's really quite reflective of what I just mentioned. It's just more specific ordinance language. I won't hit all of it. I think I'll just go through some of the things that have come up. There is the registration process, and you can probably follow along with the bold, the titles. But the registration process, again, the town clerk would administer it. You have to be the owner. I want to add something, or the owner's representative in there. So to register it, you cannot register it for one unit and then try to change it to another. That's pretty basic. We need an emergency contact that has a 60-minute response time. So if you're out of state and you have a company that does this for you, that company can be the response time. And then you require a certificate of insurance. And right now, the certificate of insurance is written for a $1 million policy, or you are hosting through a site that provides that level of insurance. I know I've gotten a question about that. So you go in, you go to the town clerk, you fill out the application, you provide the information. That person would issue your registration within 10 business days. And then you would get in the queue for a safety inspection. And the current draft says that you would have an inspection within the first 30 days. There is a grace period written in for if we do proceed with this and the town adopts it, getting started of 12 months. There's no way we could go out and inspect 300 units in 30 days. So the first initial run would be prolonged over a period of time. But then ongoing, as we get maybe 10 new or so a year, they would be inspected pretty quickly after that. So you would go in, get your registration. Your requirement after that, you schedule for that inspection, but you have to do a posting in the unit. There's a registration number, there's a contact, probably most of the things that you already have. I've stayed in many Airbnbs and there's always really great information of here's who you call, here's what you do, if you have this emergency, but those sorts of things, you would post that. And then you have to maintain accurate, up-to-date records. And then those records have to be available within 10 business days if the town were to ask for them. And then, like I said, the inspections, we've gone over that. That is really about smoke alarms, carbon monoxide poisoning, or carbon monoxide detectors. A building evacuation plan would need to be posted, and a floor plan of the unit. So there are a couple of other standards that are written in the draft. So there's occupancy limits. And the way it's written right now is the occupancy is how many people can rent the space. And so we have it written as 2 overnight guests per room, and then 2 additional overnight guests in space. I do know that I've gotten some questions about that because many of these spaces might be outfitted with, more like a bunkhouse, and you might have more people. So I think that language needs to be tweaked a bit, but I'd love to hear some input on that one. The parking, we already have a chapter that prohibits on-street parking for short-term rentals. So in your application, you just have to tell them, where your parking is going to be, pretty standard stuff. And you would have to also acknowledge your trash and how that's going to be handled, and that you would be in accordance with the good neighbor ordinance. So we have a good neighbor ordinance in place now that really takes care of noise complaints, these sorts of things. So those would all still apply. There is a section that's written for violations and penalties, and that would be really if you're not parking in the right place, you have trash, and these things, you know, these things are items that your tenants of your Airbnb might do, but it would also, it's your responsibility to take care of those. And I don't think, it's not written so there's no one watching, you know, if your tenant leaves the trash out, you don't go grab it within an hour. I don't think that's how this is meant to be. It's meant to be, this is a problem and it's not being taken care of. There is a process in here, as a complaint process. I'm not sure that I'm totally on board with it yet. So it seems a bit harsh to me, the way it's written. It was, and I wrote it, but right now it's modeled a little bit after our cannabis as a starting point, so it does seem a bit harsh. But there's a complaint process. So if anybody were to call in a complaint, it has to be validated by the code enforcement officer. The police could come out, but they have to give their findings to our code enforcement officer. And that complaint has to be verified within 5 days. I like that part. I'm all set with that part. But for the first, and I'm all set with this part, the first substantiated complaint, the code enforcement officer works with the owner to correct the issue. So if we get a call on our department that says, you know, these people are repeatedly parking on the street and blocking my neighbor's drive, I'm a neighbor and they're blocking my driveway. We go out, we see that that's actually happening. We contact the owner, we work out a plan. Maybe they have to put up a cone or they have to do something really to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's great. We've corrected the issue. But then the way the draft is written now, after the second substantiated complaint, that short-term rental permit would be suspended for the rest of the year. And I think that might be a little too much. So definitely putting that out there. And then there's a third substantiated complaint. I think there needs to be some level, but what those numbers are, I think can be worked on a bit more. That you would lose your permit for the rest of the year. So that's that. And then, yeah, the next steps, we have this meeting, it's May 15th. I have it scheduled for ordinance committee draft in July. So from now until July 1, I am just taking public comment, redrafting, having open conversations. We need to do more of these meetings. Definitely open to that. And then the plan is for ordinance committee in July, if it goes through ordinance committee, for those of you who may not be familiar, the ordinance committee is made up of 3 counselors. And those 3 counselors say yay or nay to move it on or not to the full council. So if it doesn't get moved on, it's done. If it does get moved on to council, then it would be like in August for a first reading and then August, September. And then there would ultimately be an effective date established as well. So that is what I have. Again, my name is Autumn Spear, and then my email, I'm just gonna read it to you because it's not up there. If you want to reach out to me, and then we'll just start talking very respectfully. And Scott's first.
I just, is there any way to have it not go to ordinance committee? Is there any way to stop it now? Or is it only the ordinance committee?
I
that can make that
think, you
decision?
know, through this process, and public input, I'm staff representing, work that the council has asked me to do for their council goal, but I would definitely say that I don't want to speak for them, but I think if there's a overarching, opposition, or if there's nothing that we can't get through, I think that's certainly a possibility, but this is part of that whole process. So, with that, I do have it set up, so if you don't want to speak, you're certainly welcome to write little comments or ask questions. I will try to reach out to, and if you email me, it's ASPEER, so asphere@scarboroughmaine.org. I have a running list of opposition letters and a couple of favor letters. So I'm saving all those up for a final report to the ordinance committee. So that'll be part of that packet. But yeah, if you would like to, ask questions or just make general comments, if we have a pretty full room. So if we could just keep it to 2 or 3 minutes, that'd be great.
Autumn? Just real
Yes.
quick,
Oh, yeah.
just some housekeeping, just so your comments get recorded, the speakers in the ceiling are pretty sensitive, but if you
talk softly, please use your diaphragm and speak a little, to make sure your comments are recorded properly. And I think what we'll do with as many people that are here is we'll take turns going from the room to online, and we'll do our best to try and keep that moving in as fair as we can.
So I'm gonna start with you. Well, can I just go like in order so it's not crazy and I keep up with it?
My name's Elizabeth Edgecombe and I live down in Higgins where we've been renting for generations. And I have yet to hear a satisfying answer about what the purpose of, what problem are we trying to solve by creating a new ordinance with a lot of red tape associated with it. I heard at one point the reason was there were noise complaints that were repeated at some properties, and I don't understand why we can't just call the person who pays the taxes on that building. Like, there's no reason I should have to jump through multiple red hoops and possibly have a neighbor who's angry. And, you know, we do have somebody at Beach who likes to cause trouble for neighbors and makes a lot of complaints. I can imagine losing my ability to pay for my taxes by a neighbor being difficult with this ordinance, and all for, no one can really tell me why. Can you speak to why?
Sure, I think that's definitely a fair question and I've heard that a lot. I think the why started out, there have been some complaints, and I would say it's not, we don't get complaints really from the beach communities, but we've gotten complaints from elsewhere and other communities about noise. It's also, I would say probably the biggest component to it is a safety factor. I know, that's why the deputy fire chief and the fire chief are here really to weigh in on that. When we have emergency calls and there's not an awareness that maybe it's not just a normal single family home, but there might be 12 people renting it, that sets them up for a different situation and a safety scenario. But and that's why I want to say, I think my goal with it is to make it as the least amount of red tape as possible, and not overcomplicate it. So if we do have a process, we started out just saying, okay, I think we need a list so we at least know, but then there was some liability that we need to at least make sure that we need to enter the site and make sure that the smoke detectors are there and those things are there. That's really the best answer I have.
I would respectfully say that's not a very good answer to me. Like, I understand your intention is positive, and I appreciate the work that's gone into it. But the problems that you're talking about, you already mentioned there's a good neighbor ordinance. I don't understand why we can't just use that and enforce it. And I would like to go on record as saying I'm displeased with that as a reason for an entire moving on. Thank you.
Yeah, no, totally hear you. So I'm still in the front. I'm gonna do it this way.
My personal
Anything-
feelings is agreeing with lady here is that you just said you don't have a problem with the beach area, okay? People that move into that area know that there are rentals down, so that negates that whole argument. My thing is, make the beach communities exempt from this ordinance. This is crazy.
So, I don't know if everybody heard, but, the idea is to exempt the beach communities, show of hands.
If there's gonna be an ordinance at all,
Yeah,
definitely.
there was, I mean, is
'cause
that?
that-
ordinance,
yeah.
Yeah, if there were gonna be an ordinance, would that make it easier? I
The
see.
people that pay the most taxes, you know, down by the beach.
Okay, staying on the front row.
I own property at Beach Beach, and I totally agree with what both of these people are saying. Why? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't, and we pay so many taxes right now, and to just restrict what's not broken.
Sure.
So that's my, thank you.
On before you go, I'm gonna go online.
Oh, okay, let's go to online.
Couple of things.
I'm sorry. Oh, Rich.
Play off.
And while he's taking care of online, you don't have to speak if you all agree.
Wait,
I
go
mean, you
ahead and
can-
unmute yourself and,
So-
sorry.
We can, so almost like I won't be able to get to everyone if we do individually, but if you have anything that you're like, oh, I could live with this, but God, this is really terrible, let me know. That'd be really helpful. I overwhelmingly know that no one is a lot of people don't like this. I'd say like who's in favor? Okay, so I got it, I got it. So that's why I wanna make sure that, we don't have to overwhelm. Did you get on one?
I got
Okay,
Can you all hear me all right?
You can hear you, Clay.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Clay Williams. I'm part of a family who has owned and rented in Higgins Beach for over 20 years. I appreciate all the hard work and the fact that even though this is being considered, it's not trying to limit our ability as property owners to rent. My question is related to inspections and liability. So say that this gets passed and the fire safety officer or code enforcement inspects a property and says everything is fine, and then an issue comes up after that, would that make the town liable? That's kind of, first thing that came to mind. And the second thing, I've worked in municipal government before, and I understand how busy a code enforcement officer can be, especially in a town like Scarborough that's growing at this pace. And I just don't want to see an undue burden done onto them where, what people have said in the meeting room, that there doesn't seem to be problems we're trying to solve here. That's just my sort of comment. But I appreciate all the hard work, Autumn, and that's it.
thank you. And just to address your comment, we don't take on any more liability for that. We inspect every new building in town, or we issue certificates of occupancy, but we're not responsible for things that are ultimately maybe missed or something that happens after we walk out the door. But it is our desire to have some sort of check that, yes, we know. We have seen places that perhaps no one should have been in the first place. And so there's some extremes out there that we'd really like to make sure we can prevent. So how about we do this? So we have about an hour. We're done at 6:30. So how about we take questions? I've got the comment part down, like no one wants this, but let's see if we did have it, but I want to get to you guys too. I'm just saying.
Give some time to the minority.
Yeah, I do. I'm just saying for those of you that don't want it, if you have specific questions, let's formulate those and then I'll hear from the people who are in favor.
Who are not in favor?
Who are in favor. So Sue,
Yeah, so why is the town taking on the issue of insurance, whether or not someone has appropriate insurance? And how is the town you're actually gonna read the details of policy?
we do check insurance for many of our licenses and it's just, you give us a deck page and we see what it is, but I don't know the specifics of how detailed the town
Yeah,
clerk
we're not,
reviews
we're not
them.
looking at
We're
policies,
not.
but we're looking at certificates of insurance
Yeah.
that show evidence that there is insurance on property in the proper amounts. That's a standard thing we do almost across the board.
Do the other towns that have short-term rental ordinances check? the
Yes,
insurance?
they did.
Do
A
they
lot
have
of them
this-
had insurance requirements.
They have that same level?
I would have to go back and look. This was a standard that I'd found, but I could check to see. So it sounds like the insurance level might be too high if we keep.
Can I read a comment? From specific to the insurance topic you're talking about. This is from Mary Clark. Insurance for coastal properties is very expensive already, and some companies won't insure coastal properties. If I go get a new policy, I might not be able to.
Yes.
Where did the $1 million policy come from? And I think that's been answered. It was kind of something we took from other communities.
Yeah, we'll
but I'll let you-
definitely look into that more. Okay.
That's $1 million in liability
Yeah.
coverage.
Yeah.
That we're not concerned with property damage per se, we're concerned about liability, what may happen on your property while you're hosting guests.
But isn't that the homeowner's responsibility to
Right,
have, if they don't have proper liability, that's on them.
Yeah.
If they're underinsured, I mean, a lot of people, we had an insurance agent actually at our team lunch today. He's probably the top flood insurance agent in the state. He was talking about his own mother in California her property was insured only for about a quarter of the value of what it was. She was underinsured, she didn't know. There's a lot of people in the town like that, and it shouldn't be the town's business or part of this ordinance. You know, and even with the storms that happened last January, he was telling me that 40% of the people that suffered flood damage didn't have flood insurance.
Again, this is,
Yeah.
our primary concern is not property coverage, it's for liability. And I think under normal circumstances, we wouldn't be interested, but in this regime, I think really from a consumer protection point of view, I think it's a fair point to raise. And your comments are well
Yeah.
taken, I think.
Well,
Yeah, we'll look at it. Let's-
For
I'm gonna
vehicle,
go to
for
the-
vehicle insurance with registration, there's not, you know, someone can have more liability coverage or.
But there are
But there are
minimums.
minimal liability coverage you're required to have as part of your
Yeah.
vehicle registration, but the same theory.
But we can look at it and see what those minimums might be. I'm gonna go to the back really quick.
You know, the reality is that whether seasonal or intermittent, these things are public accommodations. They don't apply to that last sentence of paragraph B there because there are already safety standards in the ordinance that pertain to those types of public accommodation. These safety standards aren't because the neighbor's pissed off about noise. These safety standards is because you have a person who's a member of the public who's going to avail themselves of your public accommodation, and they are not in a position to know what kind of risks they're assuming. So if you don't have the right kind of insurance, or you're underinsured, or you decide to self-insure with assets that might be adequate today but not tomorrow, then where does that leave the injured party? Whether that injured party is one of your customers in your building or a neighbor who may have endured some sort of loss. You might wind up self-insuring whether you intended to or not. And these capacity limits, I think the deputy fire chief was very eloquent about why that is in there. And that has to do with the people who are renting these places. The reason I like the ordinance is because it mitigates the impact on residential neighborhoods.
I just wanted to mention there's a couple other agreeing comments with Mary Clark's comment, one from Tony Heyman. His concern is about insurance and also the complaint process. And then can't say her last name, Valerie Shishi. Same concerns, and she mentioned the 300 homes. Isn't that a very small percentage of all homes in Scarborough? Rental homes create noise issues, do rental homes have to go through inspections, and do non-rental homes have to show a $1 million insurance policy? So all about insurance, those are all.
Frank.
Thanks. I'm Larry Kane, and I had a kind of a two-part question. One, has any work been done to kind of look back at complaints in general and assess what percentage of complaints in town are from short-term rentals?
So that's a great question, and that's one of the things we can't do because we don't know who is short-term renting. I just reached out to a source and got a list the other day of addresses that are been active on Airbnb and VRBO for the past 6 months. But until that, the town doesn't have any records for those. So if we get a complaint, there's no way to classify it as a short-term rental complaint.
Maybe like
So that's,
even anecdotally of how often are police and fire having to respond to the beach communities versus the community as a
Yeah.
whole? And then the other thing that I had a problem with is the fee structure, not necessarily amount, but that it's one more cost to the homeowner. And if a lot of these violations are covered by other ordinances in town, noise, good neighbor, should the cost be borne by the violators rather than the owners? So if you said, well, we would have to increase the fees for the violations to cover costs rather than going to the property owner.
well, the property owner would pay the violations though. We wouldn't. So if you were.
Sorry, I'm
renting-
saying, I know,
Oh.
I'm saying in lieu of the fee,
Gotcha.
that you would, that if the fines for violating were higher, that's where the revenue would
Gotcha,
come
gotcha.
from rather than the fees. to the
Yeah, because I
owner.
don't think that the idea is for a revenue stream. It's really, so it may be possible that maybe it's a one-time, and I talk off the cuff, well, you probably all know me, so I just kind of brainstorm with groups of people. It could be that maybe it's a one-time fee and then it's an annually, you just get registered and you don't have to pay the fee again because you're not getting another inspection, you're doing the same thing, you've been good. And it's possible that might be a way to structure it so it seems more fair. And then maybe if it changes ownership and then we do have to go do another inspection, it's another one-time fee. That might be a way to look at it as well. So it's not that annual added cost, especially if we're not doing anything to really.
The first part of that was getting to how bad is this problem that we're trying
Yeah,
to solve.
and I think that was
Yeah.
part of it. We didn't really, anecdotally, we were hearing that it's a bad problem, but we didn't have a way to really figure out how bad because we don't know where they all were. And it's not, and like I said, it wasn't really about the problem at the beach. It was about problems elsewhere in your normal, typical residential neighborhoods. And once I got this address list, I can see that there are some in places you wouldn't think anybody would be renting, but they are, and that's fine, they can. But those are the kinds of information that it might be helpful if you are considering purchasing a rural property west of the turnpike, you know, to know where these are. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna go to the back. I'm gonna go here.
Okay, it's kind of a piggyback question. So I heard 300 mentioned, 300 short-term rentals, but that's also a guess, right? Because even though we have the Airbnb list, we really don't know how many we have.
Oh, no, I don't have a full list yet. I think when we first started, we had gotten an estimate that there were about 340 active. This last time I had them pull a really quick estimate, and there were 120 or so. But it was before the summer had really started when I got it.
Yeah, I think it
so-
was active in the last 6 months.
Yeah, so I feel like that's probably picked, so we probably have 300 to 400 advertised Airbnbs, and then we probably have, I don't know, another, Scott might help me, like 50 or so, that they're not advertised, they're just repeat people
Yeah.
that come, right? These people have been going to them, the same ones for over
And a
20
majority of-
years.
Even the Airbnbs, I looked as well, majority of them are in the beach communities.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
So and in the beach communities, a majority of those are professionally managed with all these standards and sometimes more in place.
Right. I'm gonna go to you, sir. You've been patient.
My question's about the accessory dwelling unit, as I'm reading for the first time here. On our property, we have a home and a cottage, and both are insured. Am I reading this right, that the cottage can't be, is that true?
It's true.
Even though it's a separate,
Yeah, you could rent it. You could rent it out seasonally. You could rent it out, you know, year long. You can rent it out for 29 days. But you cannot rent it for short-term rentals. And because you have an ADU, you can't short-term rental your home either. And that is an existing ordinance. When you get your certificate of occupancy and you come in for building
even though it has a
permit.
separate address?
Yeah. You sign an affidavit when you get that building permit for that ADU.
I
That
mean, if
you
the
cannot
cottage
do
has a
that.
separate address.
You might not have.
You,
Yeah.
Yeah, we can check
Maybe ask
yours.
Brian to speak on
Yeah.
that, because I've had some questions on that as well.
well, we can check yours, but did you build the cottage or did you buy it that way?
There when.
Oh, okay, so are you at the beach?
Yeah.
Then you might have one that predates.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
talking more about current.
ADUs that were permitted as ADUs
Oh.
under our ordinance.
Right.
Because it specifically says you can't rent them for less than 28 days. If you have a grandfathered cottage
Yeah,
at
it's been
the
there for-
beach.
Yeah,
different
you are
network.
probably
Yeah.
different. Yes, yes.
Okay, then.
Well, I can always check your address, but more than likely you fall in that grandfather.
Oh, thank God.
But if you did it today, which we do, I had a call today, I had a question today. There was a house that came on the market and it has an ADU that was permitted as an ADU like 6 years ago. And they cannot short-term rental it. I'm gonna go here.
I'm Danielle Delaquilla. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the, the complaint thing, because I know that there's been some complaints about our house while we are there. So we do rent our primary home out, probably a total of maybe 30 days within a year's time. And there's been one time that our direct neighbor next door told us that there was loud noise at 2 a.m. from a group of golfers. I will never rent to all men again, sorry, sorry. But anyway, That's the one complaint from our direct neighbor. I know there's been other complaints from people in the surrounding area, but we were there. So that's
Yeah,
the good
yeah.
ordinance thing. So I just want to make sure, like, if these complaints are going to be, like you're saying, they have to be confirmed,
Mhm.
correct? So that means a police officer, a fire person, someone of the law, whatever, it will be visiting to make sure,
Right.
like to sign off on who's there.
Yeah,
Because I could see it being a problem for us of, you know, we're out by our fire pit with a bunch of
Yes.
friends at 9:30 at night and it's before 10 o'clock and whatever, maybe we're still at 10
Yeah.
o'clock and you know what I mean? I don't want that to be an issue.
we actually, in the small group, we actually added a clause that if the owner is the one that's
Mhm.
disturbing, it doesn't count against your short-term rental
Yeah,
violation. Like if, so we take
Yeah.
care of that.
He may still be in violation of the
Yes.
ordinance.
Of course,
But not
of
for
course.
this
Not
purpose.
this one.
Yeah, just not that one, yeah.
We're gonna go to the very back. So I'm getting you next.
Okay.
I'm Ralda Adams. I own a house at Higgins. And I short-term rent in the winter, which is a bit of a challenge. This whole thing bubbled up during the affordable housing conversation is how all of this started. And since then, it's kind of taken on a life of its own. And it was determined and within the first couple of meetings that obviously this was not going to solve the affordable housing because most people who had short-term rentals owned a house and rented it so they could pay their taxes. So it wasn't a problem solving for affordable housing. But since then, it's taken on this sort of life of its own and shifted, to several different committees to try and find a home. And I guess I still don't understand the goal of it. And I don't understand how these ordinances seem to be quite duplicated in other ordinances within the town. And so how many of the town ordinances are duplicated in this ordinance?
This ordinance references a few ordinances, but it's not duplicating. It's just, it's highlighting. References the traffic chapter about the parking and it references the good neighbor ordinance. And then it references the zoning ordinance, so about the applicability. But it's not a duplicate.
But it's a good over 50% duplicate, right?
No, there's nothing in this ordinance that is in anywhere else in our town ordinances. So this is its own standalone ordinance. But yeah, to your point, I think that this is really about doing the least intrusive way so that we can have awareness and make sure that they are safe for people who come into our community and stay in these facilities. That's really the goal, because the people that are coming to stay, they should be able to know that they are safe. And all of the other beach communities around us, I think all of them have these, and it's sort of, so that's what.
Not Goose Rocks.
Not Goose, except for Goose Rocks, right? They're exempt from Goose Rocks.
Well, I got a question online that's been waiting for quite a bit. Don't have a last name, but it's from Sue. And her question is, why is the owner of property liable if renters didn't follow ordinances? Why isn't the renter responsible and given a fine versus the owner? That's an important question.
So if you were, for one, because the renter's gone within 5 days most typically, and it's your responsibility, it would be your responsibility as the owner, it's your property. I think that's pretty straightforward.
Recording in progress.
Thank you. My name is Lee Bonnie and I own a cottage in Pine Point representing, not Higgins Beach, but same idea. Assuming we don't get the Goose Rocks exemption, which I would be in favor of, why 28 days? What's magic about that? Because I've rented to the same 4 families for between 10 and 25 years. And sometimes they want the month at door. And July has 31 days.
Oh, they could stay. I mean, that's fine. The 28 days really is used to define, is it a short-term rental or not a short-term rental. So the 31 days would not be defined as a short-term rental.
As long as you
So you can rent it as long as you want,
That
but
would be,
that,
that would be.
it's just a
I wouldn't have to
classified.
do any of this if it was 31 days.
Gotcha. Yeah, if that's all you rented it for, you wouldn't have to do short-term rentals.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanna know if in the process of talking about creating this ordinance, anyone thought of maybe starting in with a simpler approach where we all just self-inspect, like you give us the list of things you want us to have? Cause I feel like, you know, I've got renters for 40 years coming to our family house. And we've always taken care of them and taken care of the smoke alarms and because we're doing our due diligence, because we want them to come back because they help us pay the taxes. So I'd be for something where it doesn't cost us more money than it already costs us. But if you want a list to give us or even a registration, so you know that we're doing it.
Right.
But I don't know why it costs us money if we're not getting anything out of it.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering, why not trust us since we've already, I think, done a pretty good job. So anyway, that was just my concern, that no one's given us that opportunity to do this on our own. Cause we really have already been doing it.
Right. I understand that.
Awesome. I do have a question, and I wasn't sure if it was put into sorry, my name is Allison, and I own Bailey Vacation Rentals in Scarborough. Thank you guys for finding the time to be here as well. One of my questions was if we had an estimated cost from the town for compliance, from each of the departments, if that's been overviewed of what the cost would be towards the town.
The cost for us,
Yes, the efforts it would take between multiple departments and multiple people as well as in-person responses, if there's an estimated cost that's been.
not yet, no.
Okay,
no.
so there's a potential that it can cost the town more money to make this regulation happen with this thoroughness, if I understand.
It's entirely possible. We
Okay.
do, in my department, we are going through online software implementation. So the idea was that it would be, you register and everything is pretty much automated and then it gets distributed. So it could just be part of our normal licensing. It would be pretty minimal, except for that inspection cost. And that does have some, but I don't think our goal was really to get back all of that cost. So the fee would not grow higher. And but that's why I was thinking, you know, if it does go through, maybe it's the initial and then it is just a registration process, to your point.
And we got more. My other one, which was asked as well, but the big one is just the number of reported issues, which that has been addressed there. I did want to ask as well, if the short-term rental definition has been verified with the state definition of short-term rentals, it's fine about 10 years ago.
I'm thinking the process, it has been, but I'll double check.
Yeah. And then one of my other items here as well is we do highlight multiple times on the importance of safety, which is something that we take very seriously for us as well. We have a pretty thorough safety requirement. But one of the things I hadn't seen on here was the word safety written as a primary talking point. My other commentary regarding safety is it does mention carbon monoxide detectors, but it's not the same for the gas detectors that have been defined at the state level. So I know it mentions carbon, but I did not see a separate for the gas.
Okay, I'll get with the fire department, make sure.
Awesome. And then one of the other points, and this is from the Scarborough census from 2019 to 2023, it states that 76% of homes are homeowner occupied. So that leaves about 23.3% who are not owner occupied. And I'd be curious to see, not an rhetorical question, right? At what small percentage of the 23.3 would actually lose their secondary home? Because the intention of renting this property is to cover the cost of owning a home. So would our 23.3 diminish smaller because people would have to sell their properties because they can't afford them anymore? And that's from the Scarborough 2019 to 2023 census.
So are you thinking that going through this process?
Because I would say, I don't want to put a percentage behind it, but from conversations that are had here as well as my independent owners, a lot of these homeowners have these second homes to pass to generation.
Sure.
Or to be able to keep in their family. It is very minimal that we're seeing a true investment opportunity here for someone to come in and make a large return on investment, because obviously the cost of owning a home is extremely large compared to our 8 to 10 week season that we see here in this summer. So that was one of my concerns for those who are secondary homeowners, the large potential loss because they can't rent or having limitations with this.
What part of this would you classify as it would cause a loss?
A loss
Just to understand.
because if these are put into place, it will limit a lot of people and therefore put them more into a position where they would have to sell their property
I
because.
guess I don't I'm trying to understand why it would limit them, because if it was $100 or if they haven't had to have a fire detector.
Yeah.
I was trying to,
No,
I'm not
no,
trying to be
no,
sassy, I'm trying to understand.
No, yeah. Yeah.
If you take away somebody's right to rent that house, so like the way this is structured and saying, you know, they could lose their license or whatever you're.
Oh, it's the
Right,
complaint
that-
penalty
that
section,
ends
that's
up-
what I wanted to make sure.
Right,
Got it,
because a lot of
got
times
it,
too,
that makes sense, thank you.
you know, I think a lot of times too.
I totally understand, I just wanted to make sure which part was.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, in real estate, what we see, you know, and I have Bailey Realty Group. You know,
Yeah.
You know, vacation rentals. I think a lot of times you see too is that who's gonna control. Sometimes we have upset neighbors.
Sure.
That continually complain, continually. I mean, you know, I like to say everybody's a good person, but sometimes we do have situations, you know, even when you list a house in real estate, where somebody doesn't like where you put the sign, or somebody doesn't like this, or somebody doesn't like that, and it's a constant thing, like that would have to be managed as
Yeah, that
well.
makes total sense, I think that's kind of why I struggle with this part, so, yeah, got it, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Nicholas Truman, 366 Pine Point Road in Scarborough, also owner of Unit 1 and Unit 4 at the Lighthouse Suites at Pine Point. They're rental properties. I'd like you to go to page 3, and this is under F. And I'm looking at the part that says, a short-term rental owner must maintain accurate, up-to-date records of all rental transactions involving short-term rentals, including the number of tenants, length of their stays, and upcoming reservations. Present that information at town inspection officials upon request. Failure to show those terms provided information within 10 business days, request the same shall be considered a violation of this section.
So you don't like that part, right?
Oh, good.
Well, I've had a motel here for 40 years. I didn't have to give the
Yeah.
town who's coming to stay, how
Gotcha.
many days they're staying, how many people are staying in the unit. It's absurd. And to require people that are homeowners that are renting their homes to come up with this information, I think it's intrusive. I think the whole thing's intrusive, number one. But number two, that's just one. I'm gonna go to another section about the fire department. I think it's wonderful that we have fire inspection. I have nothing problem with that. Having smoke detectors in all the units, bedrooms, what you put on here. The other part I noticed about the evacuation plan. You know, most of these people have a cottage, with 1 or 2 doors to get in and out.
Right, it's pretty easy.
Okay, but you know, I'm just getting into the minutia. I mean, you can get carried away with this minutia of these
Yeah, no, I mean, this
regulations.
is good,
Again, I'm gonna say everybody in this room is putting a fire detector in every one of their bedrooms. They're putting fire detectors in their living rooms. We have insurance, we have special insurance because we know that we're liable because we have renters in the property. I have a special policy because I have renters, I know I'm renting the property. So I just think you're going down a slippery slope here. Now, who's gonna inspect, who's doing the inspections? Fire officials doing these inspections? Is it code enforcement?
code enforcement and fire, we
And
do
fire,
it together,
and
yeah.
they're doing this once a year on each property.
No, so the idea was that they would do, we would, if we move forward with this, say January 1st, we would have 12 months to inspect everybody who registers. And then we wouldn't do it again until the property changed hands, or if maybe we had gotten a lot of complaints, or we felt like, oh, this was a tricky one, but it's written for every 3 to 5 years thereafter.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
That's in
yes.
here. It's in
Yes,
here.
sir.
Oh, I missed that thing.
Yes.
Thanks for your time.
In the possibility that this passes, I mean, I also worked for the government for 32 years. And something that starts as simple as this turns into an incredible amount of work for you, okay?
Yes.
And the idea is there is one of you, and there's a certain amount of fire and police. What we're looking at is taking on a problem that isn't just what I consider a big problem. I'm not saying it's perfect by no means. But are we looking down the line in 5 years where you need to hire more people that are gonna be specific for this? Because to get the code enforcer to your house, to get an inspector to your house, we're talking weeks. So I mean, I rent 9-10 weeks a year. I mean, if I have a violation and they have to come, what is creating an incredible amount of headache, and it's not gonna be your fault that you can't come for 2 weeks because they have 20 complaints and they don't have enough time each day. So I'm looking at this as, okay, we have a problem. This is one way of solving the problem. I mean, my thoughts are, instead of an ordinance on us who are trying to do the best we can, if you have the facility between the police and the fire department where the complaints that they get, and I can guarantee you, someone lived across the street from me and unfortunately had some mental illnesses. The police were there every week. I mean, our officials know our town. They're smart people. They know where the problems are. Instead of coming up with something like this, we have in place officials that police our neighborhoods. Do they need to go to neighborhood X because once a week they get a call? I mean, they're very aware of what's going on. And I mean, for me, I've rented out for 25 years and no, I'm happy to see you guys, but they've never been to my house. So, I mean, I see where this is coming from, but can we look at it another way where we already have in place people that work for us and that are smart? And instead of adding another layer of laws that we're all trying to manage and figure out, and certainly we try to comply with. So just a thought.
Yes.
There's one aspect of the code enforcement as part of the inspection that confuses me, and I don't know if it's clear in here in the current draft, and I just need it explained to me, or if it's to be determined. A lot of the properties that are rented are very old properties. Like, let's just take, I don't know if the owner's here, but let's just take the Green Bee at Higgins, for example. It's a house everybody knows. It's a very old house. It may not meet today's building standards. It would be, you'll get a whole lot more pushback if the idea is that if it's inspected, it needs to be redone to meet today's standards.
And that's not,
What is that?
we're not, the only thing in section G is the inspection is really about your smoke alarms, your carbon monoxide and your gas alarms. If there's an attached garage, fuel fired appliance, that, and then if there's a fire extinguisher in the building evacuation. So there's no other, now, I'm not gonna say if John walks in and sees piles and piles of newspaper this high and there's a path to get to a little room in the back you're trying to rent, he's gonna bring that, that's gonna be a problem. But generally, it's very basic.
And we might find things like heaters on the kitchen floor, or things like that, that's a safety. That's not a reconstruction of your plan.
Right,
It's
right.
just a safety. So
And
those things.
Okay. And I would honestly doubt that would happen. Like,
You'd be surprised.
With the checklist that Scott gives us.
Yeah.
Hello, John Brennan, Deputy Fire Chief at Oversee Fire Prevention. So a couple pieces, smoke and carbon monoxide, I think you guys are all have spoken to that and you'll have those in place. Combustible gas detectors is something totally different. This was put in place by Governor Mills after the Farmington tragedy. I was just looking up the state statute. So all rental units, and basically the language says, in a residential rental unit, under the terms of a rental agreement or under a month-to-month tenancy, are required to have combustible gas detectors. So, and that has to be in every room that a gas-powered appliance is in there. So this is by state statute. And it basically spells it out and says that that evidence of negligence and subsequent civil action arising from death, property loss, or personal injury. So someone mentioned earlier about the property owner being responsible. Ultimately, yes, you are. If I go do an inspection on a business today or an apartment building and there's no violations, or you had violations previously and they're on a reinspection, or Brian is, and we say, yeah, everything's been cleared, you're good. When someone asks me for a letter saying that, it'll say at the time of the reinspection on this day at this time, because we all know that I walk out of there and the mattress, God forbid, goes back in the stairwell, right? So I can't be everywhere at the same time. But it's important that you guys get the combustible gas piece in that, and if you need some, the information on that, I can certainly send that to Autumn and she can share it. But that is something that's in place now. I will tell you that, the previous fire chief, Chief Thurlow, I went to him and said, awesome idea. Unfortunately, the governor, the one thing she didn't take into account is supply and demand. These were very hard to find for a while, so I was not writing these as a violation. I was doing education and simply saying, this is a requirement. God forbid if something happens, this could come into play in potential liability litigation, a lawsuit, something like that with someone that was harmed. But I couldn't enforce something that people physically couldn't get their hands on. And I think that still exists somewhat today, but I just want to make you aware that that is a requirement. There was a local business yesterday that was brand new. He emailed me back and said, am I not gonna get my CO because I can't find it? I had to order online. Ace Hardware didn't have it. You're good. You'll get your CO. You have the education. You know you're required to do it. We'll re-inspect in a year and I'm sure it'll be in place. So.
Just a follow-up question, does propane count? The propane.
So what it says is any fuel, I'll read it right to you. Second. A building owner shall install or cause to be installed in accordance with the manufacturer requirements, at least one approved fuel gas detector in every room containing an appliance that combusts propane, natural gas, or liquid propane gas in, and then it goes through the listing of all the types of occupancies, but then section 3 literally speaks to the residential unit. I might as well just read that so you have it. So in a residential unit occupied under the terms of rental agreement or under month-to-month tenancy, at the time of each occupancy, the landlord/building owner shall provide fuel gas detectors in accordance with subsection 2, which I just covered, if fuel gas detectors are not already there. Each fuel gas detector must be in working condition. After notification in writing by the tenant of any deficiencies in the fuel gas detector, the landlord shall repair or replace the detector. And then it basically goes into saying, again, the same thing that you all know, it's up to the landlord or owner to assume that responsibility. What we do, and this is with every type of occupancy, is ultimately it comes down to the building owner. The building owner is always the one responsible. So one of the things that a lot of communities deal with short-term rentals is outside fires. So you have a fire pit, right? In the state of Maine, under the open burning law, it talks about that the building owner has to approve that. So if our firefighters respond to an outside fire, whether it's short-term or not short-term, doesn't matter, and they have questions about what's going on there, they can ask, is the building owner present? If the building owner is not present, then they can ask, all right, I need to see approval that the building owner is allowing you to burn on their property with them not being here. And if they say, I don't have that, then that's grounds per the Forest Service for us to extinguish that fire. So outside fires are something. The other piece, as far as the older homes, what's happening nationwide, again, this is just speaking broadly, nationwide, there is a lot of evidence out there of people renting places for people to sleep that absolutely are not suitable for an overnight guest. There's documentations of sheds being rented, basements being rented where people are plopping up on a bed next to a furnace. So people are just doing obviously unsafe acts in an attempt to obviously just, they're making money, right? They're trying to do everything they can. I will say, and I spoke about it previously, in upstate New York, there was a couple, a husband and wife, that are going to jail for manslaughter because they falsified a self-inspection report and said smoke and carbon monoxide were present. Unfortunately, a mom and a young child were killed in that fire, and it's gone through the court system. They are now serving jail time for manslaughter, both of them, for falsifying that report. So that self-inspection, again, I take direction from town management. What they tell me to do, I do. But there is a lot of liability with all of that. And again, and nothing saying that I inspect or that Brian inspects if that's the way it goes. And yep, smoking CO here. Obviously, we all know that they're bad tenants and they may be bad landlords, right? You might do everything right, but if your tenant is doing something wrong and they take it off or tamper with it, hopefully you have something in your rental registration, rental, whatever they're signing to occupy your home that will protect you to say you can't do this. And that's something I have probably once or twice a month. I get calls from rental companies or attorneys that are asking for some language about smoke and carbon monoxide, combustible gas, so they can put it right in their lease agreement to kind of protect the homeowner on that. Any other questions for that?
Before we move on to that, I got quite a list of some comments,
Yeah,
six fifteen, but I just want to throw into that as well. If you don't know me, I'm Rick Kendall, I'm the fire chief. One of the things that I just want to mention is I hope that the folks that are sitting here really understand the exposure they have for what they're doing. You asked a question about an old home. If you allow people, if you were a renter or a landlord and you allow people to go into a home that don't have egress, that don't have the right detectors and those things, you are opening yourself up to, and I think some of the real estate companies in here, you're opening yourself up to a huge liability. And these things are going to huge civil cases and huge criminal cases. And one of the things I want you to make sure that I don't have an opinion on this. We don't have an opinion on it yet. If we do put something in place, we want to be able to inspect it and try and take some of that liability so that we can give you good sound advice. But what I'm concerned about a little bit is the fact that if we don't get some control over what those rental properties are doing, we're gonna see the sheds pop up. We're gonna see the different places where these people just do not belong. And remember, the fire department, the police department, and the town itself is responsible for everybody in Scarborough, not just the residents, not just the homeowners, the visitors, the people that come to our beaches, the people that do that. One bad story about something that happens in here because we don't either try and help get this situation under control, could certainly hurt everybody. And I don't have an opinion on this ordinance at this point, but if it does go through, we will be pushing for inspections because we think that's the right thing to do to make sure this has the right teeth in the ordinance. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
I'm gonna take like one more in here and then we're gonna go to online.
And I will just add though, on the combustible gas law, I did just forward Autumn the link directly to the state website for that actual Title 25. So.
I'll add everything to our website too.
Yeah.
That, and I wrote down a few other things I want to add. So I'm okay, I'll do two. Scott's looking at me.
Scott Townsend, short-term rental owner, and we're involved in quite a few properties down at Higgins Beach that we professionally manage. Definitely a lot of thoughts come to mind, but we do take this very seriously, Rich. I mean, we have standards that we adhere to. We practice the good neighbor. The properties that are next door to ones that we manage, they have our cell phone numbers because they're there. I want to know if there's something that you don't like, or you don't think the owner will like, or you don't think we'll like, please call us and let us know. We do safety checklists yearly. Couple issues that I have. One, I understand your job as the fire chief, and I think that, when we're talking about this life safety, it's almost, I don't want it, but it's almost like you should be expecting every home in Scarborough, because it's not the rental properties that have issues with smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. It's the hoarder that doesn't get out of their house. It's the people that can't afford to go out and do that. And you go in and all their smoke detector batteries are gone. Those are more concerning than the rental properties. With the rental properties, there's people in and out of them all the time. There's more eyes on those properties than a typical residence. And I also don't necessarily like the word control, because that's part of what we don't want. I mean, this starts off, it started off as housing, affordable housing, and now this is a registration process, and then it's this whole safety and violation. So and the woman that was in government for a long time, these ordinances, they start out, they're not gonna get any, if this goes into place, it's not gonna get less restrictive. They only get more restrictive, and that infringes on homeowners' rights. And then the other thing that people aren't really thinking about, and Allison brought it up about the cost, the cost to the town to do this, the fee to registration, but people aren't considering the actual cost to the homeowner. So a lot of these homeowners are out of state. They're second homes that they rent. And to do a floor plan, unless it's a brand new construction, they don't have a floor plan. Unless they're an architect or good with CAD or like that kind of stuff, they need to hire somebody to do a floor plan.
Or do it by hand.
Or do a parking plan, or do it by hand, and the measurements are gonna be all wonky. Inspections, coordinated inspections. If somebody is spending $4,000 a week to rent a property, they don't wanna be in their vacation interrupted for an inspection. If it's a tenant, we need to get notice, so we're coordinating the fire department to do an inspection, we're coordinating code enforcement. There's a whole process, and if these folks are out of state, they're gonna have to pay somebody to be there on their behalf, so that's an extra expense. And I could go on, but I want other people to speak, so that's it for today.
All right, yes, ma'am.
My question had to do with the outside fires. I live on East Grand Avenue. We've owned our property for almost 100 years, and probably for 25 years or so of that have had rentals. We are on site. for the majority of time, but some evening we might choose to go out. And there you have a rental person who is using the fire pit. So this business about having permission from the owner, I just like to know, what does that look like? Do I have a form? Do I have a piece of paper?
Yeah, and that's
What do I
right,
do
that's
about
actually not, that's not local, that's the Forest Service, the Forest Rangers. So we respond to complaints under that and it gets referred to them. The town of Scarborough is not in a position where we're taking people to court over an outside fire. When we get something that is in that realm, and let's say the outside fire is spread, or it's malicious, or they're burning stuff they're not supposed to burn, and it's a repetitive thing, we basically report to the Forest Service. As far as that scenario, I think having it in your language of a rental agreement to say, you are allowed to burn, here is the link of what is a permitted fire under the state law, under the Maine Forest Service, and they've signed that, you've given them that permission. We have dealt with one where we reached out to somebody and the homeowner said, no, they're not supposed to be burning on my property. I'm like, well, they bought a chimney here at Lowe's, they're there for 10 days, and unfortunately, they didn't put it together right, and we responded for a complaint. And then now they are out of state and they're trying to contact the tenant and say, you can't do this anymore. They told us, put it out. We told them you can't do this. We spoke with the owner, you need to put it out. And that's it. But a lot of that piece of it specifically comes right from the Forest Service. Yeah, so we don't control the size, we don't control the only thing we can go is more stringent on, like, for instance, if you can get a burning permit, we get direction from the state on what the class A is for our area. If we know that something's going on in a community where really we can't burn, we can certainly do that, but typically we follow whatever the state tells us.
Well, we use Airbnb, so the agreement really is with Airbnb. And I don't know that it has that specific.
I've used Airbnb to stay at a home, and the homeowner actually had a placard laminated that said, you are allowed to burn in this pit, use this wood, do this when you're done, and we were
Okay.
covered. So I think if you did something like that, it sounds like you just have it very clear,
Yeah.
or it would say, you are not allowed to
we
burn, do
typically
not do this.
Do a little,
Yeah.
you know, take them around and we say, here's the firewood for you and here's the pit.
Yeah.
And put it out before you go to bed, and blah, 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 blah. But, you know, I don't have it in writing.
So I
You
think
know,
you
I
could
don't have
probably
anyone
just write it.
signing it.
I think if it was included in your, it's similar, like I mentioned about the smoke detectors, right? If you have something in your lease that says, if the detectors malfunction, you will call me, you will not just remove the batteries because it's annoying you, give you, the owner, a chance to make the corrections, right? And that's where, I think it's very similar to that. If you put something in there, or if Airbnb has some language in there, or like Autumn said, if there's a sign that says this is what you can and can't do, I think that actually probably covers a lot more than just outside fires. I think the activities that can go on in the home.
The reality is they're not gonna read a 20-page document, but you can put all the stuff in there you
I
would.
would read all the things.
Well,
Like,
all right,
it's
I'm
a
just saying
sheet,
that.
and it
I
says,
think it
Most
does have
people-
a
most
sign
people
for
won't
it,
read it.
but not a whole bunch of
But it
language.
says, put your laundry in a pile by this door. I am that person.
But it's remarkable how many people
I know.
aren't that.
Let's go online, Rich.
So I got a few that have piled up here. I'm gonna read them. Some of them are statements and a couple of them are questions. Ellen Jennison, professionally managed rentals have safety and inspection standards in place. How will the town monitor and inspect those rentals that are not professionally managed and perhaps not registered? Portland has a registration process and an estimated over 50% of rentals in the city are not registered. That's from Ellen Jennison.
Okay, so that would be on a complaint. You would have 12 months to get into compliance, and then if we got a complaint, you would be in violation.
And I think it's important to note that we won't be in, to your point, Scott, we're not gonna be coming in every year and inspecting every Airbnb or any rental unit. If you change hands, if you sell it to John, when that transaction takes place, there'll be another inspection to make sure John is doing the right thing and those types of things. So it's not gonna be once.
Yeah, I understand that. It's just still coordinated.
Sure.
And that's consistent with everything we do in town. Maine Bagel, when they closed, Antigoni's Pizza moved in, they had to apply for a certificate of occupancy. They were making some changes within the space. They'd apply for a building permit. We give them a final inspection, then they get their CO.
Yeah, that makes
And that's consistent with any transaction, whether it's a business or not.
From Bruce, no last name, if you're renting your primary residence and don't have an ADU, is it subject to the 28-day rule?
No.
For example, can I rent the house to someone? Can I rent the house to someone for a week?
Yes, if you don't have an ADU, you can.
Yes. Again, Sue with no last name, no. Anyone who has house insurance and rents should have renter's insurance. It should be up to the insurance company to ensure the home is safe for renters because of the renter's insurance via owner's policy. Insurance agents prior to giving policy to owner does the inspection that meets the codes, etc. That was a comment.
I will say that doesn't always happen.
My house.
I have really nice insurance and no inspection.
Mary Clark. Will we inspect regular homes? Question mark. Why are rentals being singled out with inspection?
So regular homes get inspected upon new construction, so when the home is built.
You're not putting a stranger into your regular home and renting it to them, they're not paying you money. It's a totally different dynamic.
So we will inspect a brand new home when it's built, and then unless a building permit, unless they're making any changes, that's it. Or obviously unless, unfortunately, if we respond to a house fire, for instance, we would then re-inspect the home after they made the necessary repairs to make sure everything is up to where it needs to be before they reoccupy. So we have a house fire, and during our investigation, we realized that they're lacking smoke and carbon monoxide where they need them. Those would be required to be put in prior to us giving them their approval to reoccupy the home, because we've been in there, so now we have recognized a safety issue that has to be corrected. We make sure it's corrected before we say, okay, you're able to come back in.
Counselor Corey Fellows. As a counselor, I have not taken a position on this proposed ordinance, and I do appreciate the concerns being raised. But the basic logic behind having additional standards for rentals as opposed to regular homes is that you have people paying to stay there. And with that comes a certain expectation of safety and different levels of liability. It's why places like hotels, restaurants, and other public accommodations are subject to things like licenses and inspections. Whether what's being proposed is overly intrusive or onerous is absolutely open for debate. Mary Clark just commented to Scott Townsend's comment, well said. And the last one I have on here was from, again, Valerie, please forgive me, Mashishi. Before the meeting concludes, could the next steps be outlined again? What should homeowners do if they want to weigh in on their positions regarding the ordinance, and how will these opinions be considered in a final decision? That concludes the comments.
And then I have time for a couple more.
Just real quick, this issue of, regular homes. The town charter doesn't authorize city council to substitute its judgment for yours when you're living in your home and deciding what risks you're gonna take with your insurance, your kids. You wanna put 4 kids in a bedroom? Just go ahead and do it. The town charter does authorize the town council to take care of the public that's availing themselves of public accommodation. That's fundamental job of town council, really. Passing ordinance related to public safety. If there's stuff in here that's just too much, take it out. But to be honest with you, the registration process alone, there are properties that are limited in their ability to do short-term rentals in other ordinances that have nothing to do with this. But the owners of those will figure that out rather quick in the process when they try to register the thing, rather than finding out after they've spent money sowing seeds that will never bear fruit. So the safety part of it is just so fundamentally basic to me that I can't even comprehend why that is a problem, but there it is.
If they rent for 29 days, none of this applies.
Not the way this is written.
Different rules.
Because it
though.
would
You
just
get your-
be
Is
stains.
there a long-term?
There's not. No.
There's Maine's landlord tenant law.
Yeah. But not from anything from the tenant.
Right, so why the extra policing for 28 days and less? And not worry about 29 days or more?
Pick them up, 28.
Question.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
And this is not in favor by any means. I think you've gotten that from me. I'm not in favor of this ordinance. It basically, under the state, anything 28 days or less is considered lodging. So like a hotel that you can go in and kick somebody out, it's if they're 28 days or less. You can get the police to come over and escort them out. They can just leave like you get kicked out of a hotel. Anything greater than 28 days, the state of Maine sees as tenancy, and you need a lease, and there's certain protections to renters. So if you had say you were renting it for 45 days, there's other stipulations that needs to be their residents at that time. There's a whole thing that they fill out so they don't pay lodging tax if that's the case. But you can't, if they're doing something wrong and you have a lease in place, because it's more than 28 days, you can't kick them out. There's certain protections. You have to go through the whole eviction process. So I think that's why they put that delineator in there, is because the state laws open up a whole, or create a whole layer of protection beyond 28 days. Is that close? Okay.
Alan McClellan, I missed him. I apologize. He was waiting. Can I let him make a comment real quick? Sure.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Hear you now, Alan.
Thank you. My name's Alan. I live in Portland. I rent a house on Morning Street, Higgins Beach, through Scott and Sunny. I just wanted to say a couple of things. Not all of them are completely applicable to me, but I thought I'd bring them up. One, I purposely use Scott and Sunny Townsend and HigginsBeachMaine.com rather than Airbnb because of that extra layer of visibility with their team at my home. So I like that people are there, people are managing it, people are seeing it. I Airbnb my personal home in Portland. I live there, I manage it, I see people there. And where safety is confirmed or we're concerned, I really am. I want to make sure that definitely there is some kind of safety inspection process, but I want it done, like if it needs to be done, I want it done appropriately and thoughtfully. That being said, a thought, Airbnb does provide what they call air cover, and it is a third-party insurance policy that covers all Airbnb bookings. I don't know if that is going to go into this ordinance as like checking the box where insurance policy, that insurance policy coverage box, we need to provide a certain amount of insurance. If an Airbnb third-party policy is in place, does that considered that item fulfilled? The second one I want to bring up, I own a property in Old Orchard Beach as well, and I have come into conflict with two different inspections, one through the state of Maine housing, which passed, and one through the town of Old Orchard Beach, which failed. So I don't want to be in that situation again. If I do have to get inspected by the state of Maine and passes the state of Maine, I don't want to have a town come back to me and say, you fail, because it's stupendously frustrating. Just my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. And just to answer the first one, that insurance coverage by that third party is contemplated in the draft. So it would matter, it would work. It's
Cool.
just the amount, I think, that's in question.
Okay, yeah, I just don't know with that $1 million limit in liability. I don't know if that's always standard with.
Right. Thank you.
I could speak to probably what he ran into with Old Orchard, is that in codes and in fire codes and certain building codes, we adopt what the state has adopted, but locally we can enforce something more stringent. So for instance, in Scarborough with sprinkler systems. So this building here is required to have a sprinkler system. 25 years ago, long before me, in our sprinkler ordinance, it says, you know what? Because we know fires happen in void spaces, we want sprinklers above and below all ceilings, right? So in this thing, if you were to pop a ceiling tile, you have to put sprinkler heads above and below. That's probably Old Orchard, probably has some language. So they passed a state inspection, but maybe locally Old Orchard had something specific. And that is probably why they ran into a curbing with Old Orchard that they probably had to rectify. Because there are some stuff that we do here as well, nothing to do with short-term rentals, but there are some things in Scarborough that I require based on ordinances that have been adopted by council that is a little bit more stringent than maybe what the state or the NFPA have done. So that's probably what he ran into.
Yeah, thank you. All right, this has been really good. I think it's been really helpful for everyone to hear it. I've gotten quite a bit of feedback that's gonna be really good. I'm gonna update our website with some of the, just the general information. But next steps, this, like I said, this is planned to go to ordinance committee July 9th. And so I will take public comment, emails, calls, letters, whatever you prefer through July 1st. That allows me to put that packet together for that meeting. And then, depending on what ordinance committee does with it, you know, if they move it forward, it would be possibly an August town council meeting. Ordinance committee can keep it for a couple of months. So really the next step that I can tell you for certain is it's scheduled for ordinance committee July 9th. And feel free to bombard me with questions and calls and emails and all those things.
Or you could just decide to squash it. Very few, one or two.
I'm still staff, so, but yeah, I just like to thank you all again. Thank you all for your patience too, for our strange technical difficulties and being flexible. And thank you all to everyone online. Really appreciate it. If you haven't signed out, or signed in, please sign in and I'll put you on a list. And put your comments on the little sticky pad on the wall for me. Thank you. Thank you.
That's the meeting. Yeah. There's some places down it.
You can't do it.
You still,